My name is Elspeth Merriman, and at 70 years old, I had just done the unthinkable, signed away the hotel empire that had consumed 4 decades of my life. From a ramshackle inn on Folly Beach after my husband's sudden death, I had built a string of boutique hotels that became Charleston landmarks. The sale closed that morning, $42 million. Enough to free me from ledgers, staff crises, and endless renovations. That night, I decided to celebrate. Not with champagne for myself, my cardiologist forbade it, but with the company of my only daughter, Camilla, and her husband, Grant. We met at the Peninsula Grill, the kind of place where white linen tablecloths fell heavy and the chandeliers glowed like captured moons. Camilla arrived dazzling in a navy sheath dress. Her hair swept into a glossy knot. She kissed my cheek with the old warmth of childhood. "Mom, you did it," she said, sliding into her chair. "You really did." Grant, always perfectly polished, raised his glass to Elspeth, a woman who can outwork any man I know. His grin was charming in a way I'd never trusted. Camilla lifted her flute of champagne. To Mom, 42 million reasons to finally enjoy life. We clinked glasses. I smiled, holding my cranberry juice. The tartness steadied me, a reminder of the thin line my heart traced each day. The waiter refilled our glasses, and for a moment, the evening felt like pure celebration. I let myself imagine travels I'd postponed, mornings without alarm clocks, afternoons sketching by the Battery. Then, perhaps foolishly, I shared my plan. "I've decided to start the Merriman Foundation. In your father's name," I said. "Scholarships for children who lost parents too young. It feels right." Don't you think Camilla's smile faltered, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth, almost invisible. But after raising a daughter for nearly 4 decades, I knew her tells. A shadow had passed behind her eyes, there and gone in a breath. Grant coughed lightly into his napkin, recovering with a bright tone. "A foundation, how noble. And how much are you thinking of donating?" The chandelier light caught the rim of my untouched glass. I lifted it slowly, tasting the air instead of the drink. The sweetness of the evening dimmed, leaving me with the faintest sting of unease. I never drank alcohol. Not since the cardiologist warned me that even a single glass might tip my blood pressure into dangerous territory. Cranberry juice had become my compromise. Its bright tang a small pleasure that kept me steady. That night, the ruby liquid in its crystal glass looked almost festive beside Camilla's champagne. Halfway through the meal, my phone vibrated. It was Sophia, my attorney and oldest friend, confirming the final signatures on the sale contract. I excused myself with a smile, stepping into the corridor where the restaurant's hum dimmed into quiet marble echoes. Our conversation was brisk, wires cleared. Escrow closed. Morning delivery of funds secure. 42 million. Sealed and done. As I slipped the phone back into my bag, I caught a glimpse through the archway leading to our table. Camilla leaned close to Grant, her hand brushing his wrist. Their voices too low to carry. Grant's head inclined sharply, his mouth forming words in a clipped rhythm. Camilla nodded once, her eyes glancing toward my empty chair. When I re-entered the dining room, both of them straightened in unison, smiles stretching across their faces like curtains pulled too fast. I sat, adjusting the napkin on my lap. "All settled," I said lightly. Camilla lifted her glass, her charm intact. Grant signaled the waiter as if nothing had happened. I reached for my cranberry juice, and that was when I saw it a faint dusting clinging to the bottom curve of the glass, as though something had been stirred but not fully dissolved. My fingers hovered, a sudden stillness locking my chest. The color was unchanged, the aroma tart and innocent, but the shimmer of residue caught the chandelier's light in a way that did not belong. Perhaps another juice, I told the waiter, smiling as though it were nothing. This one's a touch too sweet. He whisked the glass away, and I folded my hands together to keep them from trembling. The evening resumed, voices and laughter around me, but the taste of unease lingered stronger than any drink could. Dinner wound down with a stiffness that clung like humidity on a July night. Camilla hugged me tightly at the door, her perfume sweet but sharp. "I'm proud of you." "Mom," she whispered, though the words landed flat. Grant offered his usual polished smile, promising we'd all get together again soon. They slipped into their car, taillights glowing red before disappearing down Market Street. I sat in my own vehicle for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting the night air cool through the cracked window. I was just about to start the engine when a soft rap startled me. I turned to see the waiter from our table, his crisp white jacket now slightly wrinkled from the long shift. His expression carried a weight that no server should have to wear. I lowered the window. "Yes." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Senora Merriman, forgive me, but there is something I must tell you." His accent placed him somewhere further south, and his eyes darted toward the restaurant as though the walls themselves might overhear. I waited, heart pressing harder against my ribs. "When you stepped away to take your call," he said, "I was serving the next table. I saw your daughter." He swallowed, his throat working. "She took out a small vial, poured a white powder into your juice. Her husband watched the room while she stirred it with her spoon. The air seemed to leave my lungs." I gripped the edge of the door. "I've worked here 15 years, he continued, "and I've never interfered in a guest's business, but I couldn't keep quiet. I wouldn't sleep." From beneath his arm, he produced a clear plastic bag. Inside, sealed tight, was my untouched glass of cranberry juice, faint grains of residue still visible. "My name is Antonio," he added softly. "I thought you should have this." For a moment, I could only stare at the evidence in his hands. Finally, I reached for it, my fingers trembling against the plastic. "Thank you," I managed. Inside, the manager discreetly called the police. Officers arrived without sirens, their presence quiet, professional. Statements were taken, evidence logged. They asked if I wanted to pursue charges. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said as they drove away. I sat in the silence, the bag heavy in my lap. Knowing the truth about my daughter could no longer be denied. The glass sat sealed in its bag on the passenger seat, glowing faintly under the streetlights as I drove through Charleston's quiet streets. I felt like I was transporting a live grenade. Each red light stretched longer than the last until I finally pulled into the discreet parking lot of Calder and Associates, where Sophia's office overlooked Meeting Street. Sophia Calder had been more than my lawyer for 30 years. She was my anchor through the storms of widowhood and the endless contracts of hotel life. She met me at the door herself, her gray hair pulled back, sharp black frames perched on her nose. Without a word, she took the bag from my trembling hands and guided me inside. "We'll use the private lab," she said. "Quick, confidential. No one else needs to know until we decide." The next morning, we drove together to a squat brick building tucked between warehouses on the edge of town. Inside, a young technician accepted the sealed glass, eyebrows lifting slightly at the urgency in Sophia's tone. A generous envelope of cash sped the process. Hours later, we returned. The technician slid a report across the counter, his voice careful. "The substance dissolved in the beverage is propranolol. The concentration is high, at least 10 times the therapeutic range." His eyes flicked to me, in someone with hypertension. It could easily trigger bradycardia. Hypotension cardiac arrest. The words rang like a verdict. My knees threatened to give, but Sophia's hand was steady on my arm. "We'll take the report," she said crisply, tucking the papers into her briefcase before guiding me outside. In the car, she exhaled. "Elspeth, this isn't just about poison in a glass. You need to see the whole picture." She pulled another folder from her bag, thick with documents. I've been watching them. Camilla and Grant are drowning. Credit cards maxed. Mortgage months behind. Collections piling up. A Lexus they can't pay for. Trips to Europe on borrowed money. They've built a palace on sand. I stared at the folder, bile rising in my throat. All the nights I'd worked double shifts after Alberto died. All the years building something lasting for Camilla's future. And this was what she had chosen. Sophia's gaze was unflinching. You cannot ignore what they've already tried. The question is what you'll do now that you know. Sleep evaded me for nights after the report. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the grains of powder dissolving into the ruby liquid. It would have slipped down my throat, unnoticed. Silent as betrayal itself. Yet the police, with their handcuffs and public trials, felt wrong. I couldn't bear to see Camilla paraded in headlines as the woman who tried to poison her own mother. Justice, I decided, had to take another form, one I would shape with my own hands. Sophia listened quietly when I told her. "Then we do it carefully," she said. "They'll come if they think it's about money. We'll invite them to my office. Frame it as revisiting the foundation plans." She made a call that same afternoon to an old friend, Daniel Mendez, a retired detective who'd settled back in Charleston after years with the State Bureau. I met him 2 days later in Sophia's paneled office. His presence steady as stone, tall, broad-shouldered, with a lined face and measured voice. He radiated the kind of authority that lingered even without a badge. "I won't intrude," he said, setting down a slim leather folder. "But I'll be nearby. If things turn, I'll step in." His eyes softened when they met mine. "You shouldn't have to face this alone." As the meeting day drew close, I rehearsed the words I might say, not as a mother begging for answers, but as a woman whose life's work and dignity had been put in jeopardy. There was a hollow ache in my chest where love for Camilla used to rest. In its place grew something colder, sharper, a resolve I hadn't felt since the days of scraping coins to keep my first in alive. On the morning of the appointment, I dressed simply a gray suit, no jewelry, my hair pulled back. My reflection looked unfamiliar. Not fragile, but carved from endurance. This would not be a shouting match. It would not be vengeance in flames. It would be reckoning in silence. The conference room smelled faintly of leather and old books, the air-conditioned chill sharper than the heat outside. Camilla arrived first, Grant half a step behind, both dressed as though they were walking into a board meeting, not a reckoning. She kissed my cheek too quickly, her eyes skimming past mine. Sophia began formally, opening a folder. "We're here to review financial plans following the hotel sale." Her voice was neutral, polished. Camilla's shoulders relaxed a fraction. That was when I slid the plastic sleeve across the table. Inside lay the toxicology report. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the analysis of the cranberry juice I was served at dinner." Camilla's eyes darted to the page, then back to me. Her lips parted, but no words came. "It contained propranolol," I continued, "at a dose designed to stop my heart." Grant leaned forward, his smile brittle. "This is absurd. Anyone could have doctored that. How do you know it isn't fabricated?" I let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Because Antonio, our waiter, saw you. He saw Camilla pour powder into my glass while you kept watch. He bagged the evidence himself. Camilla crumbled, tears streaking her carefully painted face. Mom. Please, I didn't. The door opened quietly, and Daniel Mendez stepped in. His presence filled the room like a closing door. I've reviewed their records, he said, laying a slim folder on the table. Grant. Your laptop shows searches about propranolol's cardiac effects. Camilla. You filled a prescription under an alias 3 weeks ago at a pharmacy in Mount Pleasant. Surveillance confirms it. Grant's confidence drained from his posture. Camilla pressed her face into her hands. I spoke then, not as a victim, but as someone who had chosen her ground. You have 2 choices. 1, I hand this to the police. Attempted murder carries a long sentence. 2, you sign a full confession and a no-contact agreement. It will remain locked in Sophia's safe. If anything ever happens to me, any accident, it goes straight to the authorities. Otherwise, you disappear from my life forever. Sophia slid the prepared documents across the table, her pen resting on top for a long moment. They didn't move. Then Camilla reached for the pen, her hand trembling. Grant followed, jaw tight. The scratch of ink on paper was the only sound. When the last signature dried, I closed the folder. The air in the room shifted. Something irretrievable had ended. The ride back from Sophia's office was heavy with silence. Street lamps washed the road in pale gold, each pool of light vanishing in the rearview mirror like pieces of a life I no longer owned. Sophia's hand rested on the console between us. A quiet offering. Neither of us spoke. Words seemed too fragile to survive the weight of what had just ended. At home, the house greeted me with its familiar hush. I walked through the hallway toward the one room I had avoided for years. Camilla's. The door creaked open, and the scent of dust and lavender spilled out. A time capsule preserved in stale air. The wallpaper was faded now, but the shapes of her youth remained. A ballet slipper hung from a nail, stiff with age. On the dresser sat a jewelry box she'd begged for one Christmas, its enamel chipped but still gleaming faintly. I pulled it open, and the old ballerina twirled, though the tune came out cracked and thin. My hands moved over each relic as though they were bones in a body I had already buried. A school photo, her smile gap-toothed and unguarded. A seashell she had pressed into my palm on a trip to Folly Beach, whispering, "Keep it. Mom, so you always carry me with you." I sat on the edge of her bed, the quilt sun-bleached from years of neglect, and pressed the shell against my chest. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I lost you before tonight. Didn't I? The room swallowed the whisper. But I knew it to be true. What I had signed away hours earlier was not only her presence in my life, but the illusion that she had still been mine. Grief came in waves, not the kind tied to death, but to the crueler truth of betrayal. I wept there, surrounded by relics of the girl she once was, mourning someone who still walked the earth but no longer belonged to me. Months passed, each day layering distance between me and that night in Sophia's office. Camilla and Grant slipped away like shadows, leaving behind a silence that was both merciful and raw. I filled the hours with work, but not the kind that had once consumed me. The Merriman Foundation, only a dream whispered in the soft light of the restaurant, had become my anchor. By spring, the foundation opened its first project in a brick building on the east side of Charleston, a children's literacy and housing center, where plaster had once peeled from the walls of an abandoned rectory. There were now shelves stacked with bright new books and rooms painted in hopeful colors. On the morning of the opening, the city buzzed with the easy warmth of April. Sophia stood beside me as children spilled through the doors, some holding their mother's hands, others rushing ahead with a kind of reckless joy that only youth allows. Volunteers guided them to the reading rooms, where cushions waited like invitations to another world. I wandered slowly through the rooms, taking in the laughter, the shuffle of tiny shoes on polished floors. In one corner, a girl of no more than 7 traced the letters of her name on a worksheet, her tongue poking out with concentration. Beside her, a volunteer whispered encouragement, as if the act of learning to write could summon a new future. The ache of absence still pressed against my ribs, but watching these children step into a place built for them alone, I felt something stir beneath the grief. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was purpose. At the small podium near the entrance, I adjusted the microphone. My voice wavered, then steadied. This foundation is named for my husband, Alberto Merriman, whose life was cut short too soon. He used to tell me, "Love is welcome here, control is not." That is the heart of this place. Not wealth, not power, but love, freely given. Applause filled the room, soft but insistent. I stepped down from the podium, the children's voices rising around me. For the first time in months, I felt the future press forward, carrying me with it. By late summer, the Foundation's scholarship program had drawn applicants from across South Carolina. I read every file personally, determined that no worthy student would be overlooked. One name lingered in my mind, Luisa Carvalho, a medical student requesting supplemental funding for research on cardiac treatments. Her essay was clear-eyed, precise, and carried a quiet urgency that reminded me of Alberto's devotion to his patients during his short life. We met in the Foundation office one humid afternoon. She was 24, with dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail and eyes that met mine directly. Without hesitation, "Mrs. Merriman," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for considering my project. It could mean real advances for patients with heart disease." Her voice carried conviction, not performance. Over coffee, she laid out her research plan with a clarity rare for someone so young. I found myself leaning in, caught not only by the science but by the warmth beneath her professionalism. When the meeting ended, I promised we would fund the project. Relief and gratitude lit her face, and something in her smile struck me like a memory I couldn't place. A week later, Luisa asked to meet again. She arrived at my house, shifting nervously on the porch before speaking. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "It isn't about the scholarship." We sat in the parlor, the afternoon light soft against the walls. Her words came measured, deliberate. "Camilla is my mother. She had me when she was 17. I was adopted by the Carvalhos at birth. She never told you." The room tilted. I gripped the arm of my chair, searching her face. The resemblance was there now, subtle, softened by kindness, but undeniable. "I didn't come for money," she said quickly. "I just thought you should know.